Hey y'all, welcome back to our channel Marriage and Medicine. So as you can see from the title of this video, we wanted to talk about one of the most common questions that we get in our DMs, and it's always usually someone that says like, hey, I know someone who wants to be a doctor, or my child wants to be a doctor, or whatever the case may be, and they usually will ask like, what do they need to do to actually become a doctor? So we figured this video would be helpful just to explain kind of what that process is like. And I know I'm not a doctor, but we have been together since we were freshmen in college. So
you know the whole process.
Yeah, I've seen TJ go throughout the entire process and what that looks like. So we figured it would be a good idea to do a video and just kind of explain what that's going to look like.
Right. And so it kind of depends basically based off of where you are in your journey. So again, it initially starts with high school, honestly, because high school is where you kind of get that exposure. Initially, you kind of start to make grades that are actually going to count for something at this point. So the first thing is, of course, is in high school, making sure that you're making good grades in order to get into college. And again, once you get to college and all that stuff, that's when it's really going to count, because honestly, nobody's going to go back and look at your high school grades. Nobody really cares. So in high school, make sure you get good grades, mainly so that you can get into better colleges is kind of the main thing. In high school, that's also kind of builds your foundation about study habits and just kind of getting you ready for the future altogether. During high school, I would also recommend trying to get involved in some kind of health club or something of that nature, because the main thing is I was able to get some exposure by getting a chance to shadow an orthopedic surgeon during high school, and that's kind of where I started to make sure that that was the road that I wanted to go on. So getting that exposure in high school is something I would definitely recommend. And it can be difficult to find somebody to shadow or find somebody in that field, especially in locations where you just don't connect with those kind of people a lot of times. What I would recommend in those situations is, talk to your pediatrician if you're younger, talk to your primary care doctor, and they can definitely point you a lot of times in the right direction in terms of finding somebody that you can shadow or just follow around and just kind of see what it actually is like being a doctor. Because a lot of people say, oh, I want to be a doctor, but have no idea what it's like being a doctor. So getting that exposure and getting that experience is something that's definitely beneficial, and ultimately can save you a lot of time. If you go and shadow somebody and you're like, yeah, I don't want to do this, you're done. You can move on to something else. But if you shadow people and you're like, this is cool, this is something I'm interested in, then definitely take that opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and then from there, once you go to college, I know people, when they know that they want to be a doctor or they know of someone that wants to, there's like a lot of stress of like, we got to make sure we're doing X, Y, Z, like right from the very beginning. But like, unless you're a college senior, don't stress yourself out. Like, if you're, say, a sophomore in high school, don't stress out about like, oh, I want to be a doctor and I got to do all these things like right now. Like, you have plenty of time still. But once you do get into college, of course, you want to continue to get good grades, because this is where truly medical schools, residencies are going to be looking at that. You don't technically have to major in a science major, so you don't have to be biology, chemistry, any of that, but you do have to take the required amount of math and science courses to get into medical school. But I feel like if you kind of already know that being a doctor is something that you want to do, I feel like you might as well just go ahead and major in the science courses, just because that way you don't have to worry about making sure you're getting the right number of it. Yeah. Now, if you're kind of like on the fence, you're like, I don't really know if I'm going to like this, then okay, maybe major in something else and just make sure that you're getting those appropriate number of classes in. But you might as well, if you are like for sure, that was one thing with TJ when I met him, he was like, I'm going to be a doctor, and didn't have any questions about it at all. And so it's like, if you're at that point in your life, then you might as well just go ahead and make it a little bit easier on yourself and pick one of the sciences as well. That way too, you get exposed to all different types of science classes as well. And so you're getting those basic, I don't know, prerequisites, I guess, out of the way.
Yeah, and going back to high school to college transition, do not let anybody tell you that you need to go to a certain college to get into medical school. Some people get advice like, oh, you have to go to this private school, you got to pay all this money because that's going to get you into medical school. That's not the case. I went to an HBCU. Granted, it was on a full ride there, so that was definitely good. Take those opportunities. You can go anywhere in the country, and you can get exposure. It's more so about when you're at that college, what kind of classes you take, what kind of grades you get, and then what kind of extracurricular do you have? What kind of things do you bring to the table when it comes to medical school? But nobody is going to necessarily care that you went to some private school somewhere versus going to like the state public school, which is probably the best kind of school to go to because you're going to get the most bang for your buck. But don't let anybody tell you that you need to go to one of those high dollar schools.
One thing you want to make sure that you do while you're in college, if you didn't already do it while you were in high school, is to shadow physicians. So try to pick specialties that you have an interest in. You don't have to know what type of doctor you want to be. You can try to shadow as many physicians as you possibly can in all different specialties. That will help give you an idea, number one, if you are still truly interested in medicine, if you like it, but it also can help you see maybe which specialties you thought you might have liked that you really don't like, and which ones maybe that you thought you didn't like that you do like. So I would definitely say to make sure you do that as well. Plus, that's a good way to network.
Yes.
Especially if it happens to be that you do stay in the area for medical school or maybe come back for residency. Those things just can help set you up in the long run,
Right.
and you might not even know it. So
Yeah.
definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah, and on top of that, you're going to need letters of recommendation when it comes to apply for medical school, and letters of recommendations from a physician that you've shadowed and built a relationship with. Those are key. You definitely want to make sure you ideally can have one of those because those are kind of weighted a little bit heavier in a sense if you actually have built a relationship with another physician. So definitely take advantage of that.
Something else you want to make sure that you're doing while you're in college is volunteering. So you don't have to volunteer in a hospital setting or in a medical setting. You can volunteer anywhere. Pick something that you're interested in because at least you know you want to enjoy what you're doing.
Right.
But volunteering is just a good way to show people on your resume that you were willing to invest your time in doing something that you weren't getting paid for.
Right. And on top of that, it is more important that you pick one good place and volunteer there for an extended period of time. If somebody sees longevity in that you started volunteering your freshman year at some place and you continue to volunteer all the way through senior year, that is going to look much better than volunteering an hour here, 2 hours there, just 3 hours there, just different places. That doesn't look as good. It just kind of looks like you were just kind of shopping around for volunteer opportunities, which is it's fine. Again, you're getting your volunteering in, that's good, but it just looks better when you show consistency in one location. Something else that may look good on your resume, that's also going to give you educational opportunity, which is, of course, the most important thing. Not all out here just to pad your CV, but it's getting research done. Research is basically when you are studying an idea, a topic, trying to come up with something new to present to either the scientific world or whatever it is that you're researching at the time. A lot of times you have professors who are involved in research. A lot of times you'll take their classes. So it is definitely important that you have a discussion with them at times. If they're doing some kind of research that you're interested in and you want to get involved in, please be sure to make sure that you do so because that is something else that just kind of sets you apart in certain situations. Nowadays, it kind of seems like that's a norm, unfortunately, because everybody's kind of figured out the way to do it in a sense. But it's definitely something else that can kind of set you apart in certain situations. And it's also, again, another way to build connections, another way to network, and another way to possibly get letters of recommendation down the road. Because, again, doing research is almost like a job in a sense. Like, you have to show up on time, you have to make sure that you get whatever thing's done that day that you're supposed to get done, and that's going to look good if you can get a letter of recommendation showing that you have good work ethic and that you're on time with certain activities and things of that nature.
Another thing you definitely want to establish while you're in college is making sure that you are organized and that you can handle time management well, because those are like the two key things you're going to need throughout your journey of becoming a doctor. You're going to be scheduled like meetings, interviews. You're going to have to pay attention to deadlines, when to apply for medical school, when to apply for tests, when to submit resumes, all kinds of things. And so you really need to make sure, if you're not someone who does those two things well, that during your college time, you make sure that you really tune that in, because they're going to help you in the long run. And the last thing you want is to not be aware of when medical school applications were due, and then you're like the week before trying to scramble.
That's
so
when a gap year happens right there in certain situations, for sure.
so definitely try to, if you're not already well in those areas, definitely try to strengthen those throughout your college time, so that way once you get to medical school and then of course residency, you'll be able to be more prepared for those. As you get closer to the end of your college career, you're going to start studying and ultimately take your MCAT. So of course the goal is to do well on that, but if you don't happen to do well the first time around, you can take it again. Of course it's going to cost money, but don't feel like, if you get a bad score the first time around, that's it and that was your only chance. You have options, and if you don't do well, your main goal the next time around is to show improvement. As much improvement as you can is the best way to go. But after you've taken your MCAT and you're happy with your score, then you're going to be applying for medical school, usually about end of junior year, beginning of senior year. You'll do that, and don't just apply to certain types of medical schools or certain ones that are in this location, but not those. You kind of want to try to cast a broad net when it comes to that, just because you don't know where you might go. And at that point, you might not have that many networking connections. So it's just best to try to apply to as many that you can afford to apply to.
That's the most important part, yeah. I guess expensive.
Yeah. But I mean, I wouldn't limit myself to maybe 3. Try to, like I said, just try to apply to as many as you can, and don't limit it to just location or name or anything like that.
Just apply to a variety of schools. You want to apply to some top tier schools if you kind of feel like you can possibly get into some of those. Apply to some lower tier schools, because again, the ultimate thing is you want to get into medical school, right? So everybody who goes to medical school, if you do your work, get your good grades done, all that stuff, you're going to be a doctor. That's kind of what it ends up being. So you just have to get in there, wherever that may be. And then
I was going to say, and you're going to get your degree, whether you get it at this top tier whatever school or some other school that maybe people haven't heard of. Regardless, you're getting a degree. It's not changing. One is not going to be more than the other. They're all going to still be doctorates. So
right. And it's all standardized. I mean, schools and classes have to teach a certain amount of material. Again, the way they go about teaching it may be a little bit different from one place to another. But ultimately, you're going to learn the same knowledge. You're going to take the same kind of test everybody else is taking. So it's no real big difference, honestly. So again, just cast a broader net if you can, and just get in if that is the situation.
And then after medical school, of course, is when you're going to be applying for residency. Typically, that's towards the end of your medical school years. And then, of course, after residency, you may have a fellowship. Depends on what specialty you choose. Fellowships are optional. But if you do or you don't have one, after that is attending life. So that's when you are finally done with training in school. Usually takes about 11 plus years to get there. But that's pretty much the path to becoming a doctor.
Yeah, I understand that it's a process. So, I mean, don't go into the field of medicine thinking, oh, yeah, this is going to be easy. I'm just going to fly through. It's going to be, no, it's a marathon, honestly. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so take it year by year. I mean, when you're kind of setting your goals up for the year, just kind of set it up year by year. Don't necessarily just keep thinking to the future. You want to kind of take it year by year so that you can digest it more manageably, I would say. Because it can be, again, it's a process. So.
And don't feel like your journey has to just constantly be like upwards all the time, always acing everything, always getting into everything. Like, more than likely you're bound to experience some kind of bump in your journey, whether that's a bad test grade, close to failing a class, low MCAT score, fail step 1. Like, there's something that's bound to happen at some point in those 11 years. So when or if that time comes, don't stress yourself out about it too much, because there are plenty of other people who have gone through the same thing that you have gone through, and they still became doctors one way or another. Whether that means you have to pivot or kind of work around it, but you can still become a doctor even if you do face one of those things. So don't let that discourage you and just make you feel like you have to just stop.
Exactly. And understand that test scores do not indicate how you are as a physician. I'm pretty terrible at tests. I wouldn't say terrible. I have issues with tests at times, depending on the test. And so understand that tests do not make you the physician that you are. Again, I didn't make the best scores on tests, but by the end of third year, I was basically I won like the Clinician of the Year award for my residency class, which is big for me. And so it's kind of like, it does not matter what your test scores are. You really just want to make sure that you pass. And then from there, you kind of learn all the things you need in order to become a doctor. So don't let that be a roadblock for you. So thank you guys for watching. Feel free to leave a comment below if you have any questions about anything at all. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube, as well as you can follow us on Instagram at Marriage and Medicine. We'll see you guys in the next video.